Hi, everyone. My name is Kim, and I'm the founder, creator of Expat Mama. Through these interviews that are both in the audio podcast and the new YouTube channel, we educate people about what it's like to be an expat, which is short for expatriate, someone who's left their native country to live in another country, and we tell their stories. Today, my guest is George Saxton, who's originally from Illinois in the US, but he currently lives in Medellin, Colombia, which happens to be one of my ultimate favorite places on this whole planet. Love, love, love Medellin. I'm so excited to interview George today. Welcome, George. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Great, thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
So let's start out with your origins. Let's talk about how you grew up, what it was like, etc.
Okay, I grew up in a northwest suburb of Chicago, small town. When I was growing up, there was maybe 3,000 people. Of course, it's much larger now. I lived there until I got married. I got married very young. I would not recommend that, but I did. And so at the age of 20, I got married. That's when I moved out of Grays Lake, Illinois. And I have two siblings. I'm the oldest. I went through the regular school system, played some sports, got interested in music, was in a rock band a lot of the time during my teenage years and into my early 20s. And music has continued as a interest and a hobby of mine. I don't know what else you'd like to know about that, but
so fairly real middle class American upbringing.
Yeah.
Is that a good guess?
Yeah, my father was a paper salesman, and by that, he would sell to companies that like printed newspapers and stuff, not just pieces of paper. So and he worked in Chicago, so he commuted, and there were trains from different parts of the suburbs of Chicago going back and forth. And I grew up a Cubs and a Bears fan, and when I was growing up, there was no Bulls. So so I did all of that, and generally I used to put the words long suffering in front of Cubs fan, but after the World Series in 2016, which they won on my birthday,
hey!
best birthday present ever. Yeah, seriously. So I can't say that anymore, but it was, it's pretty normal upbringing. I grew up in the 60s. I'm very much a child of the 60s.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm looking at the questionnaire here that I had you fill out, and your dad was an immigrant from England, correct?
Yes, he immigrated. My grandfather came over first. He came over and went to Canada first, and then came down to the United States. He was a carpenter, and he settled in a town called Winnetka, which or Kenilworth. They're like next to one another, and that is a very, very wealthy suburb of Chicago. And as my dad would tell me, he grew up on the other side of the tracks. So his father would work in the homes of the wealthy people that lived in the area. He was a very good carpenter. My father and my mother were very much affected by the Depression. They went through the Depression, and my dad was served in World War II on a minesweeper in the South Pacific, and that very much affected him too. I get
how so? How did that affect him?
Well, he was in his 30s when he volunteered for the Navy. And I always got the impression that the things that he saw in the war and had to endure, I know they went through 3 typhoons. They were on a minesweeper is a relatively small ship, or was, and it's wooden because it can't be metal because you don't want to set up the mines. And their job was to find mines and explode them so that the larger ships could go through the area.
Wow.
And so he just seemed to be, every year on December 7th, there would be a note on the refrigerator to the 3 of us saying, do you know what happened on this day in
Pearl
19,
Harbor.
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
bombing of
Mhm.
Pearl Harbor. And every year, in fact, to this day, my sister will send me a text on December 7th with the same question on it. So
Wow.
I also got my love of sports. He was a sports guy, and probably he was a basketball star in high school, and he got a couple of scholarship offers, but because of the depression, he had to stay and work and help support the family. And so he was never able to do what it was his first love, and that was sports. I think he probably would have made a terrific coach of an athletic
Wow.
team or an athletic director or something like that, but he was never able to do that. My mom was a nurse, and she would work off and on during my youth, more so as I got older. My mom did not learn to drive, I don't think, until she was in her 40s, which was kind of odd because we lived in an area that really didn't have a lot of public transportation. It had the train. There were no buses. I don't even remember ever seeing a taxi. We were probably 10 or 12 miles from the county seat, which was Waukegan, Illinois. And so in a lot of ways, I guess it was just a typical white middle class suburban upbringing. I if I wanted to see any person of color, I had to go into Waukegan because there were no people of color.
Those were other times. I mean, those were
Yeah.
like
Yes.
historical times, really.
Yes, I do remember one incident. When I was growing up, I think I was in 8th grade, a family in Grays Lake took in a couple of Black kids, African-American kids, foster kids. And they got rocks thrown through their window and threats. And it always puzzled me. My father was probably the least prejudiced person I've ever met. My mother was pretty much the same. And my father had a friend in the shipping department where he worked who was African-American. And my father kept inviting him up to Grays Lake for dinner and, for the weekend or whatever. And the guy kept declining. And my father could never understand why he didn't want to come. At one point, Grays Lake was the center of the Ku Klux Klan for Lake County, Illinois.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Yeah. So my father just didn't get that. And I grew up in that background too. So I didn't get it either. I didn't see any difference except skin color. So that, that all kind of formed me. And also my mom being a nurse took care of people. And that kind of formed me also in the sense that that's kind of what I did for a living. I became a psychotherapist to help people.
So interesting. I actually started my master's to become a psychotherapist 4 to 5 years ago. I can't remember, 2017. Yeah. Wow. So I'm interested in continuing this conversation off camera. Yes.
Okay, sure. And I have
psychology is very, very fascinating.
Yeah, I have an MSW and an LCSW. That's my background.
Very interesting. Well, let's fast forward a little bit. You live your life until how many years ago in the US?
Well, the story is a little involved. Yeah, up until 2017, Colombia and Medellin were not even on my radar. And I met someone online, a young female psychologist, and at that time she didn't have a job. She couldn't find a job in her profession. And we started talking. It was kind of natural because she was interested in psychology and I was a practicing psychotherapist. And we just kind of evolved into a friendship. And so in 2019, I was at the end of my second marriage. I tell everybody there won't be a third divorce because there won't be a third marriage.
Can relate here. Can relate. Everyone has to go through a divorce or two, or three. Who knows? Yes.
So at that time, I had decided when I met Wendy, my friend, I started trying to learn Spanish because she kept telling me she was going to learn English, and she would start and stop and start and stop. And I figured it was just easier if I learned Spanish. So
For
I wanted
sure.
to be able to communicate with her. And I decided in 2019 to visit Medellin, where she lived, because she would send me pictures of like the Christmas lights and the mountains and the kids. At that time, she was volunteering at a foundation for kids that were homeless, and she would send me pictures of the kids she worked with and all that. And it just, as I talked, I got interested. So
Yeah.
I decided to visit in 2019. And my wife had filed for divorce right before I left. And so that kind of set up what happened. I went and participated in a Spanish immersion school in an area called Laureles. And to me, it was like a different world.
It is a different world.
Yeah. And the people were all very friendly.
Yes.
They all would tell me my Spanish was good, and I knew that wasn't true, but they were very nice.
That's what we discovered. I don't know. We went there the same year, by the way. I found we were living in Mexico, and the closest internet. Okay, we were living in Merida, Mexico at the time in 2019. And the closest big airport would be Cancun, which we'd take a bus 4 hours away. I found this super duper airfare, and I happened to have another single mom who lived there with her kids in Medellin. And it was coming up, that at the time you could only stay in Mexico for 180 days. It's a little bit more lenient than Colombia is for their tourist visas. So at that time, we had to leave the country and then come back in. And I found this super airfare for like $150 round trip from Cancun. It's like super, it's not that price anymore. I'm like, let's go, boys, let's go. What do you think? And then we happened to have somebody we knew there who could take us around, show us the city and everything. So we decided to do that. And from the moment we flew into Medellin, it was just so breathtaking to look out. I come from, Utah, it's a desert. To see that much green, that much vegetation, it's just like, wow. And then they came to pick us up in the airport, and it got better. When we get into the city, and it's like going up and down ski slopes, it literally is that way. It's like going up and down mountains.
Yes.
I was like, what is this place? I thought I was in Narnia. I mean, I was like, and then we stayed in, I think, Poblado, which is a nice neighborhood too. And we were fairly close to a mall called Vida Envigado. I know you know all these places, but there is an energy in that place that is indescribable. But it's like this perfect climate. It's kind of dewy. And maybe you can expand a little bit more on this, but we just thought this place is God's chosen place on this planet. We had the best vacation of our lives there, really, in so many ways. But the people, every time we get out of our taxi, we don't blend in. You would never blend in, probably, and I won't either.
Oh, nobody mistakes me for a native.
Never. And I'm 5'10", so that's quite a bit taller than the average Colombian, and my kids too. So as soon as we get out of the mall, there would be people just bombarding us to help us at every turn. I couldn't believe it. I was like, who are these people? They were so hospitable, so friendly. And then the coffee, that's another topic in itself. It was unbelievably yummy. So let's continue on this. On this time, am I wrong in my assumption here?
No, not at all. Not at all. I found what you said to be true. I traveled with, I didn't want to go alone, so I traveled with my daughter, who now is 49, and at the time was 43. And I don't know, somewhere around there, mid 40s. And we stayed with a local family. I wanted to do the whole immersion thing. So we stayed with a family. and they were very friendly, very nice.
Yeah.
A guy that I had been doing a language exchange with from Colombia, he lived in Bucaramanga, and he hopped on his motorcycle and drove 7 hours and checked into a motel so he could meet me in person and spend a weekend with me. That's just the kind of people that they are.
Yes, they'll go out of their way. They may not
Yes.
even have that much, but they'll give you what they have, right?
Yep.
Shirt
Yep.
off their back if they could. Yeah.
And so I discovered from the immersion school that my Spanish was a little better than I thought. They have 4 levels with 2 sections in each level, and I was in the middle. So I was like level 2, section 4, or section 2, level 2, and then up to the next level. In the second week I was there. And I spent a lot of time in the areas where most people would spend time coming from the United States. I stayed in Laureles, but I spent a lot of time in Poblado. That was
Beautiful area.
it's a beautiful area, but there's something familiar about it too. It's not uncommon to hear people speaking English,
Right.
and not uncommon to have people that speak English. I learned that Uber works fine in Medellin, just like it does in the United States. And I had many conversations in Spanish with Uber drivers. And all of that helped me to improve my Spanish. I got to spend a little time with my friend Wendy. We met in person, and I think I saw her 3 times while I was there. And it was just an opportunity for me, is how I looked at it, because I was going through a divorce.
Yeah.
And under Wisconsin law, my ex never worked the whole 22 years we were married. And then that was an issue in the marriage. And under Wisconsin law, it doesn't matter. I have to give her approximately half of my income.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it didn't turn out to be that, because she has some Social Security, but it was like a good third of my income.
Wow.
And so I quickly found out that the cost of living in Medellin is much lower than it is in the United States.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and so I'm more or less affluent in Medellin, and here in the United States, I'm in the United States right now, just visiting for the Christmas season. And I wouldn't be able to live a lifestyle that I can there. So I went to the first week I was there, I went to a meetup for an actual website called Medellin Guru. And the guy that ran that blog really it's just information for expats from Medellin by a guy who's from the United States, who moved to Medellin and publishes this blog. And I met a bunch of people, and one of the people that I met was a real estate agent from Canada who had a partner from Colombia. And we talked, and I said, I'm thinking about retiring here. I know it's the first time I've ever been here, but this seems like a good solution for me. And, I like the people, and I know my Spanish will improve, and it just seems like a good opportunity. And so after I went back to the United States, he and I kept in contact every once in a while. And once my divorce was final, if I kept working, I would have to pay my ex half of my income. And that didn't seem like a good deal. And I had spent 41 years as a psychotherapist. I was ready to retire anyway. And so I retired at the end of 2020, the very last day. And I had a one-way ticket to Medellin on the 9th of January. On the 8th, I did a seminar for a bunch of judges and lawyers on one of the programs that I created and ran for the agency I worked for. And the next day I was on an airplane. I had had hip surgery, wasn't planned, in October, and developed a blood clot, so I couldn't walk very
Oh, boy.
well. Yeah, and so they were pushing me through the airport, but I was determined. I made the decision I was gonna at least try to live in Medellin. That was way out of my comfort zone, but I had decided, hey, this is something I want to do. So I landed in Medellin. The guy who I had met, the real estate agent, had walked out of his house one day, looked up across the street, and there was a Se Vende sign of a really nice apartment, three bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, real good size apartment, a balcony, you could, with a view of the Andes Mountains,
Oh, nice.
for the equivalent of about $650 a month US. And I knew that if you put in a very nice neighborhood, if you put that apartment in a similar neighborhood in Chicago, you'd be paying about $3,000 a month or more.
Easily.
Yeah. So I had, he had sent me a video, so I'd never been in the apartment, but I rented the apartment. I had one of the people that I met at the immersion school, my professor for the first week, and he was looking to move out of his family's home, and so he and I decided to become roommates.
Nice.
Yes, and so I got there in the height of the pandemic. There was 4,000 or so new cases a day, and I don't regret it at all. I love the city. I can't say enough good things about the people. It's been a great experience.
Espérame. Wait for me. I'll be coming to visit you. Can't wait to get back there. So can you talk a little bit about more? Excuse me, that didn't come out very well. Can you talk some more about what Medellin is really like? Get into some more detail.
Well, okay. To be real honest with you, there are places that I feel safe where I'm at, and I feel safe to places where I go. But I know from my friends there are places that I shouldn't go alone.
Right.
And that's like any big city. That's like Chicago. That's like, I did some investigating. The most prevalent crime there is stealing a cell phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Pickpocketing.
and there are cities in the United States that, according to the murder rate, assault rate, the crime statistics, there are cities in the US that are more dangerous than Medellin, Colombia. Medellin has a reputation because of Pablo Escobar, but he died 30 years ago. And
yeah, so that was going to be my next comment. I mean, like, people think, especially Americans, I think that we have a lot of misinformation out there, because it was the center of Pablo Escobar's reign of terror.
Yep.
So what is it like now? That was, I mean, a serious situation back then. What have they done now to just kind of clean up that image? And maybe what do you know about that?
It's a modern city. It
Yeah.
just is a modern city. It's got a really good transportation system. Colombia has a very good healthcare system. The WHO rates their healthcare system higher than the US. I have access to healthcare system, and I have someone that I pay to help me navigate through that. There is that help available. When I got my visa, I did that all from the US, through the Colombian embassy in Chicago, but by using a company called Expat Group. And I about 4 days after I submitted all of my documents, they had my visa and sent me an electronic.
4 days later? Are you kidding?
Yeah, after I got everything there, they
So
actually
fast.
they even couriered it to Bogota.
Wow.
So they did, they did a great job. I ask a lot of questions, so they were very patient with me. And I ended up on a first name basis with several of the people that worked there.
That's just George, which would be Jorge in
Yes,
Colombia.
yes.
Yeah. Do they call you George or Jorge there?
They all call me George.
Oh, interesting. So you're George the American.
Yeah, they make a point. I think it's because I make a point to speak to them in Spanish. I've noticed a lot of expats don't, well, maybe not a lot, but there are expats that don't learn Spanish. I don't understand that because they don't.
I don't either.
There isn't a lot of English speakers in Medellin.
Right.
There are some, but I figured if I'm going to be in their country, I need to learn the language.
Amen. I'm so glad you said that because I live in probably the biggest expat community in Mexico. Not that I didn't want it to be that way because my first country I lived in was Argentina. That I lived there for almost 18 years. And I was never surrounded by expats. In fact, I was the resident foreigner in that particular area that we lived in. So it was a little bit isolated, but to come to a place like this, and I'm noticing exactly what you say, that they're not taking the time to learn Spanish. Some are, but then there's this elite group who thinks that they shouldn't have to learn Spanish and that they can just live and create the best life in this country, which I say no to that. I say, what? Why do you move to a foreign country and you don't integrate yourself, except for they have, their help coming. They have their domestic employees, the maids, the gardeners,
Sure.
and they pretty much probably just, and there are plenty of these service people who actually speak English. They've had to adapt to so many foreigners. Sure. But what you're saying is so important. It's so important. Get integrated, learn the language. That is something called respect if you're living in somebody else's country. What more can you say about that?
Well, I think that goes for the culture too.
Yeah.
There are definitely some things I do not like about the culture there. Okay. Specifically, we already hit on it a little bit. The culture of service there is not what it is in the United States. It's not even close. If somebody says they're going to be like, to get an internet connection after I got there,
yeah,
it took 3 weeks and 4 appointments, 2 of which they didn't show up and they didn't call to cancel. They didn't tell us they weren't going to show up.
Yep, there's a lot of that.
So yeah. that was it has been a learning experience. I go to a restaurant and I have to ask to get the check to pay.
Oh yes, I noticed that in Colombia. I noticed that. Yes, you can sit there all day, and unless you ask for the check, they won't bring it to you.
There have been a few times that I have started to walk out for getting to pay, not because I didn't want to pay, but it had been like 2 hours that I had been sitting there without a check, and then they'll give you the check.
Right.
But yeah, that was a little difficult. Yeah.
I noticed that. It's something I forgot about. Now I'm recalling that did happen. Yes.
To be balanced. I think I told you one of the things that I did is my friend Wendy and I started a business together.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It has since closed. And part of that was just because the culture is so much different. And she is very bright, but she has no experience
in business, no business sense, right?
No. and if she wanted to, I mean, if it was up to her, she would do everything for free. And it was, the business was to teach social emotional learning to kids in Medellin.
Got it.
And I made a mistake. I should have probably controlled it more, but I wanted to be partners. I didn't want to be her boss.
Right.
And so I have noticed in talking to other business people there, though, the mindset of a business owner there is pretty similar to the mindset in the US. And there are people that are definitely entrepreneurs in Medellin, from the person that goes up and down the streets with a cart selling vegetables or fruit or both, just with a loudspeaker. I don't know if you experienced that when you were there.
Oh, no, I'm not Mexican. Are you kidding? They'll probably come by during this interview. The tamales guy will probably come by, the ice cream guy, whatever they're selling with the loudspeaker. Yeah.
Yeah.
You just
These are
never know what
mostly
to expect here. Yeah,
fruits
it's
and
daily life.
vegetables. Yes. And then music too. They set up an amplifier and a guitar and a microphone. Sometimes it's a whole band, and they just give a little concert, and then they get tips, and then they move on to another area. And so, but then what I found was a real division between the people that are entrepreneurs and the people that aren't. And that was very hard for me to bridge, and very frustrating, especially with the if you make an appointment with somebody in the US, my culture from the US was you're on time. If you have a 10 o'clock appointment, your appointment's at 10 o'clock.
Not the case there.
And so one of the issues that Wendy and I had when we were going to use mentors to teach music and art and use social emotional learning skills as an umbrella to do that. It was a great idea. But one of the problems she had, she didn't want me to be in charge of the mentors because she was afraid I'd be too hard on them by insisting that they were there on time for the classes. You're like, to me, it's just like second nature. And so that, I guess the point of all that is it took a while. It's taken a while for me to adapt to that culture.
Well, you haven't been there that long in the whole scheme of things.
So I got there on the 9th of January. I spent 5 weeks
of this year. I mean, we're on the last day. Today's New Year's Eve. Yes. So you got there in January of this year, 2021, correct? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So and that's I'm more straightforward and honest with people, and so that is not the culture there.
No, it's beaten around the bush culture.
Yeah, and it's like
and trying to be diplomatic and loving at the same time, and being courteous, and just don't want to offend anyone, and we just want to get straight to the point. Am I not right about that? Let's just not waste it. So what are you trying to say? Let's get to the point. No, they don't get to the point.
No,
that's rude to get to the point.
I had an interview when we were setting up the business. Wendy had her best friend was an administrator of an educational company. When she said best friend, that was, that set me back a little bit, because it's usually not a good idea to hire friends to work in a business.
Oh, yes.
And so we had this interview, and by that time I had another investor from the US, and I read the resume, and I really liked the resume. So I wanted to meet this young lady, and I really liked her. And so I was asking her about what hours she could work. And she kept talking about her qualifications and why she would be a good person for me to hire. And I finally said in Spanish, "You already have the job. You don't need to tell me about your qualifications." I apologize. I said, "I don't want to be rude. No quiero ser grosero. Pero tienes el trabajo." No, and it was like, and I realized that it was making me nuts, because I was 3 or 4 steps down the road already, and she was still trying to convince me.
You're like ready to sign the contract. Sign here, please.
Yes. Yeah, just tell me when you want to work. So that was my first real experience directly like that, other than waiting for the internet connection.
But you're telling it as it is, George. You're telling things as exactly as it is.
Something I learned a long time ago, it was that cultures are cultures. They have good things and not so good things. I think that some of the business culture in the United States is a little more effective than the business culture in Medellin. And I think some of the customs in Medellin, especially about family and the importance of family, is better, that it's something we could learn a lot
Hands
from it.
down, it's a million times better. Yeah, of course.
And so it was like, I want to be respectful of the culture, but on the same token, there are some things that I believe in that are part of my value system that I think are effective. So, so for me, the challenge was, how do I explain that to people in a way that they're going to understand it and not take it as something bad, but just as a suggestion.
Right. And what you also brought up a point that that I don't think in the US we would ever hire like our best friend to work with us, because we try to keep a culture of, and it's the same reason why my siblings and I wouldn't go into business together. There's just too much, there's not a respect factor in there, which needs to happen to do business. It seems like from our point of view, I want to differentiate that. But I found in most places I've been in Latin America, that's who they hire.
Yes.
They're going to hire the people they know and trust. Whether it's the best fit for the job or not, that's another topic. But they will hire the people that they know and trust, which is going to be friends and family, which is a culture shock for us.
Yes. And it actually it was one of the reasons why, one of the biggest reasons why the business didn't
flourish, didn't pick off.
And we hired two people that were people that Wendy knew. And the first hire, the administrator, was great. I told her, if I ever run a business, if I ever start a business here again, you will be the first person I hire.
Good.
And she was wonderful. And I still communicate with her, and I consider her a friend. The other person, not so much. The other person is more the reason why we no longer have a business. And in my opinion, she took advantage of the, well, I don't know how to say this other than, this is something I heard from my Colombian friends. She took advantage of the gringo.
And, yes.
Yeah,
also very common.
Yeah, she saw me as someone wealthy, and Charles, the other guy, as someone wealthy. I don't think she tried to take advantage of her friend. She took advantage of the two people that she saw as having unlimited money.
Right. Which isn't the case either. You're not a millionaire, I imagine.
No.
Yeah.
And
something in the middle. Yeah.
And the other investor wanted his investment visa, and it became, we had lots of expenses and no income. And so it became a problem. And I finally said to him, you need to think about getting your money and doing something else with it, because I can't guarantee you that this is going to work.
Yeah.
And so he decided to pull his money out, and that's what ended up.
At least he got his money back. He
got most of it back, and we're still working on it. We're in the process of actually liquidating the business even as we speak. So, and it was, I hope that Wendy will use it as a learning experience. Right now, she's probably not real happy with me, but but one of the problems was she listened to friends more than she listened to me, who has the experience. We also have the good side of this is I met a lawyer through Facebook, and he became our lawyer, and he became my personal lawyer. He speaks English, and he's worked in 5 different countries. He's a business consultant also. So he understands the cultures, and he was able to help me navigate that. And give me advice on how to approach Wendy on things, and how to approach the other people that were involved without offending them. Because my culture just says, just say it. Be nice, be polite, but just say it.
And so you found a lawyer who's culturally competent in 5 different cultures and or languages. So that's really important to find somebody like that. I bet he's a jewel.
He is. And I tell him all the time, if it weren't for you, I don't know what I would have done. I may have just given up and gone back to the United States, because it was there were
that's too bad.
It was
Yeah.
very, yeah, but he was able to explain things to me, and I guess the point of all that is I would encourage people to find somebody like that.
Mhm.
Since then, I have been through different meetings that I've gone to. I have found a couple of Colombians who actually worked in the United States
Mm.
and then came back and started businesses in Colombia.
And
And
that's really the best case scenario. You probably want to find somebody who understands your culture, not you having to always adapt to theirs too. So the
yes,
best of both worlds would be exactly that, finding a person who understands both sides of
yes,
it.
so I guess my message for the culture is keep your culture, but be respectful of theirs.
Amen to that. Yes, absolutely. Yes. And really learning the language is one and the same with learning the culture, because without learning the language, you're going to miss a lot of things there. It's kind of all built into one. Yeah. I'm a
Absolutely.
professional linguist, so I can say that.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
The first
Yes.
time somebody said to me, "Que mas?" as a greeting, that's a very common greeting in Medellin.
Que mas?
Que mas?
Oh, really? What
Yeah,
else?
and my mind is translating it as "what more?" So I didn't know how to respond to that. Hola, que mas? Que mas
What does
que?
that mean, George? I really don't have a clue.
It's like saying hi, or
Oh, wow.
like we would say, "What's up?"
Okay.
That's how I explain it to other English speakers. I just say, if we don't think it's weird to say "what's up," but when you think about those two words together, it's like, okay, what's the answer to that? The sky, the roof, the ceiling, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And what more? The answer to what more is nothing more. Yeah.
What can I say to that? It's like, yeah, I wouldn't know what to say to that, and I'm fluent in Spanish too. Which brings me to another point. We actually, we're very familiar with Argentine Spanish. I know they have a Vos dialect there, a Vos part, but it was a completely different dialect than we weren't used to. So we had a hard time understanding the locals. But after that, we're like, we're going to kick this Spanish. We're going to learn Colombian Spanish. So we started getting into watching telenovelas, which is the translation of soap operas, where there's conversation dialogue, which I think is an excellent way to learn language. I do teach languages, so I recommend that people watch that, because you can see how the culture is involved in the language, and the actors are always going to say the same thing over and over again, which will help you get that repetition, and it will go into your brain somehow.
Yes.
So that's what we decided to do. We started watching Colombian programs on Netflix and on YouTube. And now, today I think but that one's a new one for me. I don't think I ever heard it, or we missed it somehow.
It's specific to Medellin.
Oh, okay.
It's paisa.
Paisano. Yeah, paisa Spanish. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for saying that. Now I know what's I'm going to be able to incorporate that. Que mas?
Yeah. My challenge with Spanish is it just comes at me fast and with slang.
Yeah.
And so I've learned to pick out the words that I know and get the context from that. And that helps me to communicate.
Yeah, you can't just pick out each individual word. You have to look at the whole thing and see what's going on with the context. And I also do this. This channel is also in Spanish, and so recently, and I just started this at the end of October, so it's a new project for me. And I interviewed a guy from Mexico, a guy from Venezuela, but I knew the Venezuelan guy, and he knew he had to speak a little bit slower for me, because and we handled it. He was our pet sitter here in Mexico in this area. So I handled that one well, but the one I really botched up, and I will admit it, was the one from Chile.
Okay.
I could not understand him. He was a business associate of mine for several years while I was living in Argentina. But we had always communicated via email in English. So when I heard his Spanish, I'm like, I'm in trouble. It takes a lot of ear training, to get used to each dialect out there.
Yes.
Yeah,
I agree. And I had Wendy over for lunch early on, and I wanted to fix something from the US that I thought she would like. And so my roommate was there and his best friend, who's also a Spanish professor. So I would talk to Wendy, that was fine. I would talk to Juan, that was fine. I talked to Nando, that was fine. The three of them would talk. Didn't understand.
You're out of
anything
that loop now.
Yes, it's like it was like watching a tennis game.
For sure, it was like more like watching handball game, right?
Yes, it was like I
So
could.
fast paced.
Yes, and with the slang too, the paisa mixed in.
Because they'll adapt to you, and they know you're the. Do they call them gringos there, or are you called something else?
Some do. Wendy's very proper, so she wouldn't call me a gringo. And Juan doesn't either, but I don't mind.
And what is the term there that they use for?
Well, I hear gringo.
For Americans, for example.
A lot of time they just say Americano.
Americano. Okay. All right.
And which I have a problem with because we're all Americanos.
Exactly.
North Americano.
Yep.
Norte Americano.
North American. Yeah. Norteamericano or Norteamericano in mi caso, in my case. Yeah. That's true. Okay. So it's all done with respect and love and cariño.
Yeah. And I don't, I don't have I understand about the gringo prices. So generally, if I have to do something to buy, have to buy something, there's a Colombian with me. And
that's a good idea. Yeah, I was really lucky when we came back. We also came back in January. We both arrived back in our broad countries in January of last year. I had spent some time during the pandemic in Northern California, which was probably the worst year of my life after living abroad. At one point in January, I just said, we're out of here. Made the decision the same day, packed our stuff up, and we headed back to Guadalajara, Mexico. But anyway, what was the whole point I was going to tell you? I completely lost my whole train of thought. It'll come back to, oh, yes. The cost of living and being under lockdown in Northern California during the pandemic was the worst hell I've ever really experienced. And there is a such thing as reverse culture shock.
yes.
Okay. What can you say about that? You're back in the US right now.
Yeah, I use a word that's not too complimentary a lot when I'm here, idiota. And what I've noticed is
Idiot.
in Colombia, they want the vaccine. It's not a political issue in Colombia. It's a healthcare issue. Here, depends on where you are and who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And I spent about 22 years living in Milwaukee, which is only less than an hour from here by car. The cases are exploding in Wisconsin right now because of the new variant and because they don't wear masks. They don't require masks. There's people that aren't vaccinated.
Yeah.
Here, there's more people vaccinated and there's a mask requirement. And so the cases aren't increasing.
Aren't nearly as high as in the US.
Oh, and it's like, I don't understand why this is political. That's, I don't want to preach here, but to me, this is a healthcare issue. I was raised by a nurse. You listen to the doctors, you do what they say. Right. They know more about this than you do. So that's my mindset. And that is being in Colombia, coming back here is a culture shock. The reverse, I mean, when I went, it probably wasn't the greatest decision I ever made to go after hip surgery with a blood clot during a pandemic, 8 days after I retired from a job that I had for 41 years for my career for 41 years. So in retrospect, but I had already, it was a decision. And
that's determination right there. I'm going to make this work come hell or high water. This is going to happen. Yeah.
And I have this mantra: plans change, decisions don't.
Right. I love that. Plans change, but decisions don't. Okay. I think I'm going to incorporate that as part of my mantra too. I love that. Okay,
So,
let's, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt anything you're about
no,
to
no, I was
say.
just gonna say the culture is a shock both ways now.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So interesting. So just that one question that I wanted to explore a little bit. Do you know anything about, because if you don't, maybe you're so new there in Medellin, maybe you didn't know about this. But if people were to say, I'm not going to Colombia, that's a dangerous place, what would you say? Especially Medellin, which was Pablo Escobar's stomping grounds.
I guess I use 3 words to answer that. Don't be stupid, and you'll be fine.
Good, good, good.
Don't act like you're not in a large city like Chicago or New York or Los Angeles, or I mean, Medellin is about the size of Chicago population wise. It isn't even has suburbs around it. What I call suburbs, they call them different. They call them municipos.
Municipios. Okay, got it.
And so don't be stupid. Don't do illegal things. Don't try to buy drugs. For the men, don't try to pick up women in bars who you've never met. I mean, oddly enough, my friend Wendy wants me to call her, or not call her, text her on WhatsApp every night to tell her that I'm home and I'm safe.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I know that mentality. I know that mentality. It's really interesting because the expats that go to live in another country we're usually the types that will choose to dwell on the positive rather than the negative. Whereas the ones who are more fear-mongered are the locals, who are quite paranoid about what could possibly happen to people like us. Am I not wrong in that assessment?
That is correct, and including she has mixed feelings about our friendship because I'm so much older than she is. She's 29, and so she doesn't want anybody to think that she's an interesada.
Gotcha. That makes complete sense.
Even though there's a lot of affection there, and when there's it's like having a friendship with 2 different people in the same person. And so there's always a big hug, and there's a te quiero mucho, and which is a form of love, but not romantic love, as you know.
Right. A friendship. It's a deep friendship, what you've got with her.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And so, but I also see the fear when she's with me with people that she knows.
Okay.
And
what they might think of her.
Yes. And so, and my culture says, yes. And my culture is,
For her.
okay, who cares? You're an adult. And I know who I am. You know who I am. You know our relationship. But that's my culture. That's not her culture.
But they're really, and they tend to listen to more people that have been in their lives longer than, for example, you.
Yes.
And they are concerned about their public image, I guess.
Yes.
Getting back, just changing back to the Pablo Escobar thing, I know, because I asked around, that after he was killed, and I mean, everything, he left, and they had a lot of cleaning up to do, especially in Medellin, but all over Colombia, really. He had bombed several cities. There was lots of terrorism going on. Yes. For quite a long time. The Colombian government, I can honestly say, has done an excellent job of rehabilitating the country, making it safe again, relatively safe. Again, don't be stupid, should be part of your what you do. But they have had to work with the people, now that we're talking about psychologically, to get them to believe that they're safe. So they've done a really great job for the most part. But maybe there are still some remnants of that. You don't just have a country like Colombia where the people didn't feel safe in their own country. Tourism, you could forget about it back then. There was no international tourism. Now Colombia is booming. It's booming with tourism.
Yes.
So many people who want to visit there, so many people who want to move there, like expats. They've done a great job of rehabilitating everything.
Yes.
Mhm.
I would say something to keep in mind too, not only Pablo Escobar, but Colombia came out of 50 years of civil war in the 2000s.
Oh, yeah, and the FARC too. Mhm.
Yes. And that still is a tenuous piece at times.
Yes.
And you saw it in the unrest. The Colombian government, for some reason, decided they wanted to raise taxes that would affect people of less means, the poor and the what they call the middle class there. And after, during a pandemic, and when people weren't working, where the unemployment rate was sky high,
Right.
and the economy was bad. And I for the life of me could not understand. I mean, I understood the economic reason, but it was like you didn't expect that the people were going to have a problem with this. If you
They didn't really think it through, is what you're saying, right?
yeah, it didn't
Yeah.
seem when they finally withdrew that, and they revisited it and changed some things, but it was like something that didn't, in my mind, didn't need to happen.
Right.
And it took, and there was a lot of unrest, and things did get violent, and not in too much in Medellin, but in other parts of Colombia.
Mhm.
And so I think to think of that as part of the Pablo Escobar thing is wrong, because it was totally different.
It's a totally different scenario altogether. Mhm.
But to understand
issue.
you understand the issue. I read a report from Doctors Without Borders about the psychology in Colombia. And one of the things that they pointed out that really stuck with me was the amount of mental health issues, of anxiety among women, and alcohol and drug abuse among men.
Mhm.
And that it was, what they were doing was drawing a direct parallel between the 50 years of civil war and the narco terrorism and those mental health issues. And I can see it in my friend Wendy. I can see the paranoia. Her reason for asking me to call her, to text her every night, is because one day somebody came up to me, flashed a card, and said he was from immigration and needed to talk to me, and would I come with him to his office. And so I walked with him about a block, and I asked him some questions, and it was obvious to me after about 2 minutes that this was a scam.
Gotcha. Of course it was. Yeah.
And I said to him, I'm not going anywhere with you. If you want to talk to me, I'll call my lawyer and we can arrange a time. And that was the end of
Thinking,
it.
George. Good thinking and
Right.
fast on your feet.
But
Good.
it happened. It so happened. It was we had rented a house for the business, and it so happened that Wendy was coming to the house at the same time, and I was meeting a contractor at the same time. And so she got there. The contractor explained, "Oh yeah, George just left with this guy who said he was from immigration." And so
she's like, "Oh no, Dios mío."
she kind of freaked out. So she
Yeah.
calls me Inocente.
Yeah, of course. You were on the naive side in that, but it only took you 2 minutes to figure it out.
Yeah,
so.
I just asked him, I walked with him and asked him questions and ascertained that it wasn't legit.
Right.
I didn't feel any danger because I was in an area where there were a lot of people that,
Yeah.
And there were people who knew where I was, where I went. So I didn't, but she reacted really strongly to that.
Strongly. Yeah.
And finally I said, okay, I'll text you every night if you want. At first I got a little insulted. I thought, okay, is this because of my age? And she said, no. I would tell my friends and my boyfriend and my family the same thing. So, so it was out of caring. It was a
Right.
little annoying for me, but I understand her culture is different. Her
Mhm.
mindset is different
Yeah,
because she lived through some of that.
and you didn't.
And I did it.
Exactly. Yeah, and so you can't relate, but you've got somebody looking out for you.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. All 5'2" of her. It was like, what are you
5'2".
do?
Love
Yeah.
it. Love it. Love it. Okay, is there anything I haven't asked you about, maybe we haven't discussed during this interview that you'd like to add? To not overlook anything?
Couple of things. It was hard to get used to the people on the street
Okay,
that are living on the street. A lot of them from Venezuela,
okay.
the refugees. And I saw that when I was there in 2019 too. It's heartbreaking. My background is, I've got a degree in social work. I want to help people, but it's overwhelming
It's
because
overwhelming.
you can't help everybody. And so that was hard to get used to. It was hard to say no when you're in a restaurant and people come up because everything's open.
Mhm.
A lot of the time there's no real walls or the open air restaurants. There are no windows on a lot of the restaurants. And so people come up and they talk to you and ask you if they want to sell candy, or they ask you for money, or they're giving you a story about their children and they can't feed their kids. And so what I finally did is I selected a couple of people that I decided I would help out that I see every day.
Mhm.
One of them selling candy next to the church that's about 4 minutes from my house. So when I go past her, I give her 2,000 pesos. 2,000 pesos is less than $1.
Oh, wow, yeah, okay. This is probably not the right time to tell you this, but I remember we couldn't figure out like the difference when we were in Colombia. We couldn't figure out the difference. There's so many zeros on the
Yes.
bills. I really didn't know how much I was paying for anything.
Oh.
And the very last night, we were only there for a week in Medellin. So the last night before we were flying back to Mexico, we decided to go on and order some Chinese food, with the little takeout boxes. And I did not know what I was doing, obviously. And all this, I think we had like 8 boxes. There were only 3 of us. Huge. We had all this Chinese food that we didn't even know what to do with. I don't know how I ordered that much stuff, but I didn't even know how much I was paying or anything, because I just really had no clue how much was the conversion or anything. And so we ended up giving Chinese food to everybody in that whole building that we stayed in, that edificio. Here's security guard, take some Chinese food. Gracias, We ended up just giving it out right and left. We didn't even know what to do with all of it. But I never knew how much I was paying for anything, because it was like 200,000, whatever the currency is. What is the currency there? I'm sorry.
Currency is Colombian pesos.
Colombian
COP.
peso. Oh, that's easy enough to remember.
You can if you type in Google USD to COP or COP to USD, you'll get the
yes, yes. That's
and,
Colombian pesos.
and currently I get a text every day now with the exchange rate.
Okay.
Right today, the exchange rate is a little over 4,000 Colombian pesos per dollar.
Oh, okay, so it's it's devaluated.
Yeah, well, it's been like that. I mean, I've only paid attention for 4 years, but for the 4 years that I've paid attention, it's been like that. It's so when I pay my $650 rent, it's 2.5 million pesos.
Seems like so much in pesos.
Yes. And I joked when I came back here in the summer, my bank, I had 6 million. I said I was a millionaire. I had 6 million pesos in my bank account.
Love it. So it's easy to become confused for a person like me, or you. Yes. Yeah, you're a millionaire, definitely.
There's no good. I mean, the bill, like the 20,000 peso bill, has 20 on it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no good way to convert that.
Right. It's impossible. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, right now you can divide by 4, but a lot of the time it's 3.8,
Oh, no.
3,800 or something like that, 3,900. And the math isn't easy to do in your head. So
Right, right.
you just kind of got to get used to the amount of money you pay. Most everything, with a few exceptions, is cheaper.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure it is. So here's, what else would you like to include? So that's the one thing, you're helping somebody, giving them 2,000 pesos.
Yeah, just decide if you want to do that, decide to do it, in some way. There's charities you can give to. I prefer to do it personally.
Mhm.
The people are friendly, and they will even answer questions they don't know the answer to because they don't want to disappoint you.
Mhm. That happens in Mexico too.
Okay.
And sometimes leads me on a wild goose chase because they really don't know what they're
Yes.
telling me to, but they
Yes.
feel obligated to at least answer something out of the courtesy of their culture or whatever, or their hearts.
Right. Right. So I have adopted the habit of telling people the truth. If I don't know something, I tell them, no sé, lo siento. Most
And you
often,
can get away with that because you probably do not know.
yes. If I don't know, I'm not going to tell you. It's usually about directions, and if I don't know it,
Yes, yes.
then I'm
yes,
not
yes.
going to tell you. I'm not going to give you directions and send you on a wild goose chase.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm the same exact way. Yeah.
But I think that people are very friendly. I would say, if you have any interest at all, just come. And I've always told the people I talk to, I give them my you can give them my email address. I'm happy to answer questions.
Mhm.
For me, it was a great solution, and I'm happy I did. My mindset is 1 year at a time. So I'm finishing my first year. I've re-upped for another year, and I've got a 3-year visa. So at
Yay.
the end of next year, I will decide what I'm going to do. And when my visa runs out, then I'll have a decision. Do I want to apply for an extension? And at the end of 5 years, I think I can apply for permanent residency, I think.
Mhm.
I don't know what my health is going to be like after that. So right now it's fine. It's good. I'm real healthy. But so I'm just taking it 1 year at a time. I guess my advice would be just try it. Come for a visit. I mean, I wanted to come for a second visit, but the pandemic had different ideas. So I made a decision. I'm going to go live there, see what happens. I'll live there for a year. Worst case scenario, I don't like it, I go home.
Exactly. That's what we always talk about in these interviews. Most of the expats are so happy, that they made those decisions. But what's the worst thing you can do? You go back. But the chances you don't take, you're always going to regret.
Yes.
So
the other thing I would say is, being from the United States, there was a guy that helped us start our business, who's a very successful business person in the US that I met. And he said, you're like a rock star here. And I said, and for you, it's going to be like somebody, like you got dropped off from the International Space Station in some area of the world, a foreign land, because it's like, you're going to be like another planet, like you're from another planet to them. And I found that that's true, but it's not a bad thing. They're just curious. And they want to know. What I found is I feel more liked in Medellin than I did here.
Yes. You're getting the attention you never got in the US there.
Yeah.
I felt that way in Argentina, and in some ways they treat you get spoiled because, and when you're used to that much affection, when you get used to that, coming from a place like the US that is, we don't realize it's very cold. The relationships are not warm and affectionate. You don't get the warm and fuzzies like you get in Latin America. And they're curious to know, and they want to ask lots of questions. And some of them are the same questions all over again. So you just roll out that answer that you already know that you're supposed to say. and then more questions will come, but it's nice. And they will fill you up with that love that you've been missing out on your whole life.
Yes. Yes, and I'm a talker anyway, as you probably know now, and so I don't mind. The challenge is doing it in Spanish and doing it, and I do it correctly.
For sure. But in so many ways, they just fill you up with that love and affection that you never knew you were missing your whole life. Am I not right about that?
Yeah, I gave the porteros in my building a little some bonus for Christmas, right?
Those are the security guys, the people who take care of the building when and check everyone in. I have to translate some of this.
I'm friendly with all of them. They like me. We talk all the time. And the one guy had tears in his eyes when I gave it to him. He was really touched by it. And it was like, to me, that's just natural. You're a good guy. This is Christmas. You have a family. And it's something I can do. It's the resources that I have are that I can help
in that country. Yes, nice. It's nice to be in that position. What did you give them specifically?
150,000 pesos.
Oh wow! What that they weren't expecting right in the holidays.
Right now it's about, I don't know, $40.
Which is a fortune.
Yes.
And he cried.
Yeah. One guy had tears in his eyes, and he is a costeño.
What's that?
That's a person from the coast. The coastal areas, it's a different Spanish.
Coastal Spanish, like from Cartagena.
It's similar to Puerto Rico.
Okay.
Where Caribbean. They chop off the words. They don't say the middle part. And I don't understand.
Everything ends in ow.
Yeah, and I don't understand anything he says. But we were able to communicate. He understands my Spanish, obviously.
Right.
So yeah, it surprised me, and I was happy that I did that.
And what a moment that must have been for both of you, really.
Yes.
You're feeling happy that you're giving to someone who's appreciative, because these people are so appreciative. And we were in the next month after we went to Colombia, we went to Cuba. And we also did the same local experience like you did in Colombia, where we stayed with a local. She happened to be a pathologist by profession, much older lady. We stayed in her home. And so she connected us with some local restaurants. We'd always go to the same place every day. And these Cuban waiters were so wonderful, such wonderful people, so hospitable. And the same thing happened to me when I gave one guy a tip. The same thing happened to him. It's the first time, the only time in my life that somebody has specifically come up to me, almost with tears in his eyes, to thank me for that tip, because he was so appreciative of that, which was probably most of his salary. And in Cuba, the monthly salary is like $12 a month. So imagine me giving him maybe a $3 tip. That's in one shot is like gold to him. He just couldn't even believe it. He was so appreciative. And this is the way, the sentiment of the people.
Yeah, the minimum wage in Colombia is something like $275 a month or something like that.
Right.
And in Medellin. And it's like I don't understand how some of these people survive.
Right. I don't either. Yeah. But it's so nice to have this interaction with somebody who is so appreciative, and it's unexpected for us to see that. We live in a life of privilege. We've grown up with privilege. And for us to just tip is just a normal thing for us, but it isn't normal for them. And they really need the money. I mean, everybody does. They really need the money. But it's the sentiment that's accompanied with that we receive back. We're actually the recipients of this. For us, it's just normal. But for them, they're so appreciative of it. And I don't know. I get sentimental about talking about stuff like this too. You know? It's a special moment when you go through things like that.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to say to conclude here?
And I'll probably think of things after we're done, but
We might have a part two. We can
But,
always add in a part two.
yeah, no, I can't think of anything other than just, if you have any interest, come on. And,
Mhm.
people could ask me if they want to contact me. I'll be happy to answer questions. I don't mind that at all.
We will include your email here in the
Great.
description box. So if anyone wants to contact you, hold that thought for just
Great.
a second. For those of you who have watched this interview, first of all, thank you for watching. We're building a community here, so your comments, your feedback, your suggestions are very important to us. We feature a lot of interesting perspectives from different countries, different types of expats that are both in English and Spanish. And we would love to hear from you. So, and don't forget to subscribe, of course. George Saxton, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a true pleasure. I have learned so much from you. New phrases, all kinds of new things that get me all excited and warm and fuzzy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was real fun.
Real fun. And we are on New Year's Eve right now. So we want to wish you a happy new year and the people that are watching us a happy and a much better and healthier 2022 for the whole world.
I agree. A happy new year to you too.
Okay. Thank you. We'll be very much in touch.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.